Welcome back, guys, to another film review. Today, we're talking about Christopher Nolan's latest, Oppenheimer. This film was directed by Christopher Nolan. I'm sure you know who he is, but he's directed other films like Inception, The Dark Knight, Memento, Interstellar, Dunkirk, and right before Oppenheimer, he did Tenet. Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr., Emily Blunt, Florence Pugh, Matt Damon, Kenneth Branagh, and many more. This film's cast is so jam-packed. There are so many cameos. It's just kind of a delight as you watch it. You sit down, you start being like, oh, it's him. Oh, there's some wonderful ones in here that are in store for you. Oppenheimer is about J. Robert Oppenheimer, one of the infamous American scientists that had a very direct role in developing the atomic bombs, which were later used in Japan. As I understand it, Christopher Nolan was inspired after reading the book American Prometheus, which is also about J. Robert Oppenheimer. This film has been awfully hyped, considering that it has taken the internet by storm with another little film that's coming out, or that came out this past week, which is by the name of Barbie. They together created Barbenheimer, and that has led to some serious mutual box office success. Additionally, the community at large of filmmakers and cinephiles alike were all very excited for both of these films, which was just really reinforced once the critical reviews finally dropped after the embargo was released, and they were overall quite positive. To say I was excited is an understatement, and this was one of the biggest cinematic weekends in recent history that hasn't involved a superhero. So, did it live up to expectations? Yes. Absolutely, it did. This film was a cinematic achievement and one of Nolan's best films to date. He crafts an insane journey into the mind and this very almost subjective experience of Oppenheimer, and grapples with the moral quandaries of what transpired in the development of the atomic bomb. I knew very little about Oppenheimer and actually the specific intricate details of the Manhattan Project before I saw this movie. However, I firmly believe that Nolan was able to handle the subject in an appropriate fashion. It was thrilling and also horrifying, and not in a horror movie kind of way, even though there were some murmurs prior that this was like a horror film, but rather it deals with the horrors of nuclear weapons and the intellectual and moral conflict that was created during the time of World War II. I won't spoil anything about Oppenheimer's story, even though of course it is history. I didn't really know anything going in, and if you don't either, I think it would be really beneficial to go in knowing very little. Having not known anything about his story, I was pleasantly surprised and really engaged and able to empathize with Cillian Murphy's interpretation of Oppenheimer. Speaking of which, of course, everybody involved in this cast was utterly fantastic. I think Cillian Murphy does what is asked of him, and we see almost everything through his eyes. And it is disturbing, but also an inspiring journey through science, philosophy, and destruction. This film is a visual masterpiece and is awfully nice to look at. Nolan really leveraging those IMAX cameras, pushing them into overdrive with Hoyt van Hoytema, creating some absolutely gorgeous cinematography. He also did the cinematographer for recent films like that of Nope, and also beloved other films like Interstellar, Dunkirk, and Her. Additionally, the visual effects that were used were jaw-dropping, especially considering that Nolan claims that there were no CGI shots throughout this entire movie. Additionally, the music by Ludwig Göransson is tremendous. It grabs you and forces you to pay attention to what's going on, regardless of what's transpiring on screen, even if it is just Oppenheimer getting ready for the day and putting on his hat. I believe this is a wonderfully constructed film that is deeply impactful, but not without about its clunky bits. For example, the film in IMAX, of course, was very loud, as expected, although I might bring earplugs next time. However, the commonly kind of goofily stereotypical problem with Nolan films does arise here again, where the dialogue is kind of strangely mixed, which made it kind of difficult for me to decipher sometimes what the characters specifically were saying. But when the music comes on and we get to the expected moments that are gonna have those bangs, it is practically deafening. Additionally, another trope of Nolan's is always how he decides to kind of write and direct female characters. Here, I actually didn't find it quite that bothersome. However, I do believe that both Florence Pugh and especially Emily Blunt were fantastic. Finally, I will say that the first 2/3 of this movie, so to say the first 2 hours of the film, I was locked in. I was fully on board. However, once something happens, once we hit right around that 2-hour mark, it does start to kind of shift its focus a bit, and I found it kind of wobbled and lost me a little bit. It definitely wasn't bad or poorly constructed, I just personally was less engaged with what was going on in the last hour as I was with the first two. At the end of the day, this is a masterful filmmaker at the top of his game, creating one of the best films of his career. Regardless of those tiny little gripes, this is a masterful movie, a visual masterpiece, and definitely worth seeing at the cinema. It will be showered with awards, but before we get to that time of the season, definitely go check it out. Go check it out at the cinema. This begs you, it asks of you, please see me at the cinema. That's what Nolan wants. So if you can see it in 70mm IMAX, wherever you might be, that's the best way. If not, IMAX is probably second best in terms of that immersion. However, it is loud, and then 70mm after that. And if you don't have access to any of those formats, just go to the cinema because it's still going to be an amazing time. Go check it out. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you've already seen Oppenheimer, let me know in the comments below what you thought, and if you haven't yet, what is your favorite Nolan film? And as always, if you enjoyed this and if you enjoy or partake in my channel, go ahead, like, subscribe, and share with your people. And as always, I will see you in the next review.